So you want to sync up?
Yeah, let's sync up. So we sync up before we do any meeting. You want to do it with us?
I'm happy to.
Okay, cross your right leg over your left. Right arm underneath left armpit. Left arm on top. Head to the left and body to the right. And we'll take 6 breaths together, 3 through the mouth and 3 through the nose. So breathe in. 2, 3, through the nose. 2, 3. Well, Dave, I feel good actually.
Yeah, that BDNF.
Yeah, the BDNF you gave us.
We'll give you some Danger Coffee, BDNF.
Yeah.
The combination ought to get
good
something
combo.
happening.
I'm feeling high.
Good.
I'd admit that.
Just getting started.
We have a Ascension oil. Try this one.
Ascension, not essential. I like the name. What's in it?
It's a combination of oils. It's for terpenes for upregulating mood.
I like terpenes. So what flavors of oil is in this?
There's lemongrass in there. There's a couple.
Sweet.
Let me see.
It's weird. It's white on light brown.
Lemon, Raven Sara, Hinoki, Rhododendron, Red Champa, Absolute,
Wow.
Ormus. Have you met Dr. Nick? Essential Oil Wizardry? He's like the wizard of oils.
I don't think I have, but very few people know about Hinoki. I wrote about it in my longevity book.
Thank you.
It's the most associated with lengthening telomeres.
Yes.
It's a Japanese spruce. Yeah.
He could
I
tell
love
you
it.
every oil in there or every compound in there and what they all do.
Yeah.
That's
like
really
that.
nice.
And where to
Yeah.
put it. It's
He was
incredible.
a pharmacist who went natural.
That's a really interesting formula.
Yeah.
So it's been a long time
It's
coming.
my favorite.
Last time we worked together was 2017.
Mm-hmm. Just a little while. God, was that 8 years?
Yeah, it's been 8 years. And from the outside, I've been obviously following your journey. It's a little hard not to because you're all over the place.
It happens.
You're the biggest influencer on health and wellness from a biohacking standpoint in the world, obviously. And it's been interesting because at the same time we've been building this how do we get our body to hack itself journey, and this seems like an appropriate time to come back together and see what we can do.
Just do a check-in. I've been aware of Human Garage since 2017, and there's so much about biohacking. Get the right signal into the body, and it'll change. And if you get the right signal, and you have the right nutritional substrates and the right conditions of safety, then it's not that hard to do it. And the things I'm doing with Upgrade Labs, with deep technology on that, just get a signal in. Did you want VO2 max? Get the signal in. But what you're doing that's really interesting is like subtle neurological and fascia level signaling, and that's kind of a dark art at this point in the world of biohacking. So you're the leader in that, which is super cool.
Well, what I was looking at, I went through this journey of trying to heal myself for 20 years, spent $2.5 million, a lot like your journey, trying to figure this out.
Same amount of money too, yeah.
Yeah. And then the clinical practice scaled up to 52 practitioners, and we were doing 5,000 plus appointments a month. But I was running lab tests and experimenting on 10,000 active patients, which were everything from the Brandon Ross of the world to the U.S. Olympic team to the Dodgers to really unique and rare cases. And what I was looking for was a way to be self-sufficient because I didn't want to depend upon anybody else. So during the pandemic, we had the opportunity to basically eat our own dog food and say, can we do this ourselves? Because we couldn't get care. And we developed, we took the fascial work that we were doing in the clinic. We said, how do we do it to ourselves? And we started just literally doing it daily, 30 minutes a day. And for the first time in my entire life, after 3 months, I required no care from a practitioner.
Very cool.
And so I've been practitioner independent. So nobody assisting me since 2020, the first time in my life.
I'll show you what, so when I met Garry right after he closed the clinic, this was me. 1 year later, 1 year later, 1 year later.
Yeah, you look really different.
And the emotions, the wrinkles, the coloration of the skin, the distortion of my face. Because what had happened was I was doing stretch therapy and I was studying the body. And I was doing what everybody called fascia work. but they were just working on muscles and bones.
Yeah.
They were just doing everything that massage was doing, but they were calling it something else.
Mm.
And when we met and he did the human garage therapy on me, I remember walking out of his apartment that day like, oh my God, this is something completely different. And for the next 3 weeks, like I just shadowed him in sessions, and we were like, okay, how do we take this treatment off of a table? How do we bring this into a self-care practice? And it was a completely new way of looking at the body. And over the next 6 months, we pioneered Fascial Maneuvers, which is this movement practice that people can do on their own. And from that, it's now stemmed into even practitioners can start to take this self-care practice and accelerate it. And that's what, that transformation is about. It's like, how do we give people the tools to heal themselves now? And it's through movement.
It feels like a lot of people will be skeptical for something like this.
Sure.
But then you go, oh, why do they call it warrior pose in yoga? Or why do they have Superman pose and all these things? And they actually study what those do. So just like 20 years ago, if you'd said acupuncture works, literally they would try to cancel you and say, it can't work, it doesn't work. And now there's actually thousands of studies that show acupuncture from an educated practitioner works. So there's all these beliefs that it can't work, therefore it doesn't. And that's an anti-science belief. And it's held humanity back for a long time. So what I'm like, if it works, then we'll have data. So the idea that putting a certain shear force on fascia is going to create signaling that our brains are designed to not even be able to detect, but that we can detect in photographs, or we detect in movement patterns. So of course there's invisible parts of the world. Like you think your brain in your body shows you everything around you? I don't think so.
Well, the interesting thing about yoga is what happened is a lot of people didn't give it a chance. So what they did is they separated the philosophy with the movements, and then the movements went worldwide. But only a small percentage of people actually practiced the philosophy. It's the same thing with science and spirituality. There was a divide. We'll take the science, you take the spiritual side of things. And now it feels like the world is opening up more to the emotional, spiritual aspects of healing.
It's funny. I have a reproduction of a painting back there, which is an alchemist from the 16th century having a conversation with Mother Nature, like trying to use science to figure out how nature works. And the most modern interpretations, like biocentrism, the world around us emerges from us being conscious. And the fact that you can't see any of that, it's because our brains are pretty limited versus what's out there. So what I look at with biohacking and a lot of the ancient lineage stuff, even shamanic practice, all of these things where people have learned over the course of thousands of years that there's things that we can do that don't make rational sense because our story of rationality is limited based on there's more out there than we see. So that means you can do things like, why does doing this versus doing this do something? Well, the why, tell yourself a story about it, because there's a leprechaun on your shoulder. It doesn't matter what the story is. Does it work?
Yeah.
And that's why when I started the biohacking movement, I was 300 pounds. I had arthritis in my knees since I was 14 and a couple surgeries. And I was pre-diabetic and I had chronic fatigue syndrome and massive brain fog. And I'd been on antibiotics for 15 years. And I tried all that Western stuff that was supposed to work and I just kept getting sicker. So I said, I'm not going to do what I tried. I did 18 months straight, 6 days a week in the gym for 90 minutes a day religiously. It didn't matter if I was sick, low fat, low calorie, always hungry. Didn't lose a pound, but got stronger. And after all of that crap, I just said, I'm only going to do what works and I'm just going to test. And I don't care if there's a reason. I just want to know, if I do this, do I get this? Because I'm a computer hacker. That's how we break into systems. And you can break into this system. And that's what I think you guys are doing. You're saying, well, through the course of experimentation, what do we know works? And we can make up a story, a good theory about why it works. But even if the theory about why is wrong, that it works is all I care about, right? We'll get the theories right eventually.
It's really funny how he came from data and computers. Brian Johnson came from tech and you came from tech too in some way. It's so interesting to see.
I have a degree in AI, like who would have thought?
Yeah.
You know, one of the attributes is because I went down the scientific path and and studied and worked as a practitioner, only to find out that the application of medicine, no matter what kind, wasn't really scientific.
Not in the slightest.
It was religious. And what I like what you said is that is the measurement of results. And what happened at the clinic was we were getting results, so people let us experiment. And we had 10,000 active patients, some of the best athletes and most difficult cases in the world. Because they felt better, they allowed us to run tests. And we ran 50,000 active lab tests on these 10,000 patients that would not have been run otherwise, to experiment and try to develop a new theory.
Mhm.
And the theory was basically, if it works, let's do it. And then over time, we'll try to figure out why it works. And I'm now at the point where I have a story, like you said, about why fascial maneuvers works. And there's some things I do know for sure. But by far, I know less today than I did 5 years ago. And I'm open to anybody telling me why it works.
Yeah. And it's funny, the woman who discovered the receptor in the brain for opioids is named Candace Pert. And in her biography, she writes about how later in her career, she traveled down to South America to meet with shamans. And she explained to them about opiate receptors in the brain, and they just started laughing. And she's like, "Why are you laughing?" And they said, "You think those exist?" Like, you have no idea how it works. But bottom line is they're both doing the same thing.
Yeah.
Right.
But the story or the lens can be different. One of the models of consciousness that's most interesting is that your body makes a user interface on the real reality that's useful for you. Because your brain couldn't really comprehend all the gravity effects and quantum tunneling and all that. It's too much data. So we just throw all that stuff out, and we only get to see the amount of light that's useful for us and to sense things around us. So what that means is that each person has a slightly different way of interfacing on reality.
Sure.
And even how you organize the way you think is based on the language that you speak. So thinking that only one story explains something, it's not true. And you get things, but Newtonian physics, because Newtonian physics is provably wrong.
Yes.
And quantum physics is a better descriptor of reality, but Newtonian physics is really interesting. And if you want to live your life by Newtonian physics, it's good, because then, you won't fall off a cliff and gravity will kill you. Right? So having models is great. Believing in them like a church is bad. And this is why, does it work? That's all I care about. And I may never know why, truthfully, and that's okay too.
We come from that school.
Yeah.
And that's what you started the biohacking movement off. And when you were starting that movement off, I was still at that time convinced that a practitioner had to do it. That was my that was the hole that I was in when I met with you, worked with you last. And I came to the end of that journey because I was finally out of pain for the first time in my life. Pandemic started and I'm in pain again. And now I can't use a practitioner, how to figure it out. So you've worked around with every practitioner and therapist probably more than anybody on the planet, I would say.
It's likely, yeah.
Yeah.
There might be someone out there who hasn't yet healed their toxic mold who's seen as many as I have, but call me a tourist. I've interviewed 1,200 on my podcast, including Nobel laureates. So there's a great variety of it, and they don't all agree, which is funny. This guy gets results, and this guy gets results, and they're doing opposite things. And there's a reason. It's because it's almost never one single thing. It's like a recipe. And so many people, especially from big pharma or traditional Western medicine, like, well, we're going to find the single variable that makes a difference. Where did we prove that only a single variable matters? They just made the assumption religiously, probably because they wanted to make a drug out of it. And it turns out there's a recipe for autism, and there's a recipe for Alzheimer's, and there's a recipe for almost every kind of chronic illness. And can you make focaccia or English muffins? They're both bread. They're just different recipes. And what Western science typically says is, well, I tested the water, the flour, the yeast, and the salt. I baked each of them individually. Therefore, there is no bread.
How much do you feel what someone believes dictates the experience? Because a lot of the time, if I'm doing something for my body, if I believe it's good for me, there's the placebo and there's the nocebo, and that's a pretty powerful impact. Somehow, half the world does one thing and they think they're doing the right thing and it works for them if you test them, and then the other way around.
It's really funny that the standard for efficacy for a pharmaceutical drug is 10% better than placebo.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's crazy.
Yeah,
Yeah.
there's a bit of a problem there. So you can try to test something without paying any attention to mindset, and it won't work very well. And once you learn how to be a healer, and you know this, you're doing energy work on how to do this stuff as well, and you're working on someone, and they're actively blocking you.
Yeah.
Right. And so there's two things you can do. One is you can be like, I'm not going to do this on you because I have shit to do. Like when you deal with your trauma or whatever, done. Or if you really want to and you have the ability, like I will go around your defenses. It's just that's a lot of work, and probably they're holding on to that so they can continue suffering until they get the lesson. So I don't do that. Right. So mindset matters. Most people don't understand that their mindset is driven by their emotions. The mindset is telling a story to justify the emotions. And that's a problem. So my approach for that has to do with neurofeedback. I've run more than 1,000 people through 40 years of Zen. My next book, called Heavily Meditated, is about this kind of practice. You can go in and tell the automated systems in the body to be non-reactive to something that would have been a trigger. And then all of a sudden your reality changes, right? So if you don't feel anger or fear because the trigger was turned off, then you have to tell yourself a story about it, and then you can heal.
Yeah, you're getting it at the reaction level.
Yeah.
So here's a question. Right now, there's a huge divide where a huge majority of the world is waking up that there's more than just the physical. And then you've got people who are doubling down on the physical. And when being in the biohacking space, testing the body, measuring, testing everything that's out there, what are you seeing personally when you're working with people? Are you noticing a shift to more spiritual, or are you noticing a shift to more physical?
What I believe, after the $2.5 million I spent on myself and working either in person or online with hundreds of thousands of people, including some of the top spiritual gurus and masters in the world, if you improve the body, your spiritual abilities and presence and consciousness improves. I don't care if you enter the biohacking path because you wanted to lose weight or not have pain in your body, which are things I had, or because of brain fog. You will always end up on two paths. I want to live a very, very long time. So you're on the longevity path, and I want to be more conscious. Because once you get those things out of the way, the hindrances, like, the world could be really interesting.
Yeah.
I'd like to experience it for as long as I want. And why do I want to suffer the whole time? So consciousness and longevity are the ultimate goals for biohacking. And I created biohacking as kind of a camouflage to get people interested in longevity. And anyone who thinks they're going to live for 200 years, 300 years, which is where I am, well, you're going to have to become more conscious. You don't have a choice about it. Because who wants to be miserable and emotionally reactive for 150 years or something? That would be so boring.
Yeah. You share a belief with us, which is that basically consciousness comes through the body. It's a good way of saying it, because it's your emotions which dictate the way that you think. Your brain has to explain it.
There's a nuance there. Inside the body, I call it the meat operating system.
Sure.
Right? And there's these automated things the body has to do. All life has to do it. And so at the very core of biohacking is the fact that your mitochondria are running this operating system. And it's, number one, fear. And that is run away from, kill, or hide from scary things. Bacteria do it. Algae do it. All life on Earth has a way of protecting itself so you don't get eaten. So fear, then food, eat everything because there might be a famine, right? And then the other F word that life has to do to stay around for multiple generations. You know what that one is?
Yeah.
Fertility.
Fertility.
That's what you were thinking.
Yeah.
So fear, food, fertility in order. All life does this. And we like to think our brain's in charge. It's just one problem. There's a third of a second delay between when I clap my hands, the sound hits your ears, and your body, your mitochondria hold on to that signal for a third of a second before they show it to your auditory processing systems.
Yes.
That's the censorship window where the body decides, what am I going to make the brain in there do? What am I going to make it feel? What am I going to make it think? And it's doing fear, food, fertility. And thank God, it also does friend, which is support your community, and then forgive, which is how humans let go and evolve. So if all that's an automated system, if you fix the body, so your antenna on reality, the mitochondria, if they are stronger and your willpower is stronger because they make more energy, magic can happen. And I had one friend who's a top spiritual guru in his country in his 80s. And I got him on some mitochondrial enhancement biohacking protocols. And he called me with tears in his eyes. He's like, "You gave me my powers back. Like I'm getting
Wow.
old, and I was fading, and I don't feel faded anymore." And I've seen this consistently with shamans, with advanced meditators, with energy workers. You improve the conditions of the body, you make the mitochondria stronger, and their abilities will go up. And if you're a tech executive and you're thinking about stuff, all of a sudden your ability to think goes up. And since I started out as a tech exec and my brain was failing, I started with the brain. I eventually ended up, I got to do the body to do the brain. And of course, then the spiritual stuff emerges.
Wow, our journey is so
Yeah.
exact.
Mm-hmm.
You're speaking my language to a point where I'll be honest with you, I didn't think you were all the way there. But if you were to remove some of the language, we talk about the exact same things. So one of the things that I've found is that the piezoelectric actions of the fascia.
Mm-hmm.
So dehydration and compression. So one of the beliefs that bones was structure was the first one I challenged, because none of the bones in the body touch except for the teeth, the rib cage, and the ears. So bones physically cannot be structure because they don't touch.
Mm-hmm.
Muscles can't hold up the body because, like the knee joint, there's only one muscle crosses a knee and it's about this big and it's not holding you up. Tendons keep you from separating. So the only thing that's left is connective tissue and skin.
Mm-hmm.
And when we started looking at this, we said, well, one of the things that people notice when we do the work is that everybody decompresses, and that's why we took a photo of you today, because we want to show decompression. With a piezoelectric effect, it enhances the body's ability to communicate through the mitochondria. That's the unproven science behind what we do.
It's funny. Most people don't know what piezoelectric is, but engineers from Silicon Valley certainly do. It just means if you apply vibration, it makes an electrical signal, an electrical field. One of the things that has been a part of biohacking from day one is whole body vibration platforms, which create piezoelectric effects throughout the body. And people thought it was insane when I brought these out. Like, well, if I'm insane, stand on it for 5 minutes and tell me how insane I am. And I feel so much better and so different. Isn't that weird? And you look at the latest research on shear forces in the body. And it turns out that shear forces, even from chewing, have a systemic effect. And it's because of this piezoelectricity. And the fact that we don't sense that with our eyes and our feelings in the body, it doesn't mean it's not there. It's just an effect we didn't know.
So what part of it is that I grew up scuba diving. So
oh, cool.
From 4 years old, 13 years old, I wrote my exam because I couldn't get air anymore with my father without a license. And so I've dove my whole life. So I knew the body from physics point of view under pressure. And of course, hyperbaric or hypo.
Yeah, I have a hard-sided hyperbaric down there, so yeah.
Oh, that's cool. And so what I just understood the body from that realm. So what I started to notice while we're working with it is that there was pressure zones. Zone number 1, zone number 2, and zone number 3. But if I move pressure in this zone, it affects the hip and the ankle. And it changes the articulation of the bones and the muscles in those zones. Because if you apply pressure to a muscle, it loses force. So if we reduce pressure, it increases articulation. This is part of the stuff that at the time we worked together, I didn't understand. And
makes so much sense. One of the reasons I'm excited to catch up and see what you've got, I had Asperger's syndrome when I was a kid. And I say had because you can resolve probably 90% of that. And I have. And it's been a huge amount of work. I had to reprogram my hearing, my vision, the way my tongue moves, and a lot of my movement patterns. I was duck-footed as a kid. And my cross crawling was crap and still isn't great. And a lot of the things where if you grow up neurologically the way you're supposed to, swinging in trees and being outdoors and all that, versus me at 18 months, I was reading. So I just read all the time as a kid. Probably should have spent more time crawling, right? So what that means, I'm still working on, like, how do I stand with a perfect posture? And when I walk, I'm consciously placing each foot all of the time, because otherwise I go back to like sloppy, like falling over, duck-footed sort of stuff. So you can learn how to do it properly, but building that in so it's an automated system, so it requires less conscious effort, would be great, because then it frees up conscious effort for, I don't know, writing another book or something.
So what I discovered working with Olympic athletes, and by the way, I couldn't crawl and didn't know I couldn't crawl until 2018.
Got it.
And then everything started happening, because we were using in the first clinic before Human Garage, where my partner was Dr. David Rubenstein. He's the grandfather of neuromuscular calibration. And what we would do is we would reprogram through motion therapy the movement of the body. But what we are doing is putting a pattern over top of a dysfunctional restriction, and eventually that wears down. What I've experienced myself is that when we remove the restriction, the brain and the body optimize the movement to the original synaptic optimized program most efficient for the body. So in other words, I was doing all this programming and I didn't need to. All I had to do was remove the restriction.
That sounds way more interesting. There are patterns of movement where the body's used to moving a certain way, and you're relying on this little muscle instead of this one, and you just don't know it.
Those will go away today for you.
That's super cool. And I remember when I started doing advanced yoga, which I practiced for about 6 years, every day I was like, oh my gosh, like you can actually move this lower rib consciously? Like, what the hell? Like, there's all these muscles. I had no clue that they were there, or that there was a control system for them. And even now, having done all that, sometimes like, wow, why did I turn off my hip flexor or my left butt cheek? I have no idea. But they just get turned off for no reason. Then I got to go in and smack them and turn them back on. Like, what's up with that?
I think this is going to be fun. So I did a test. I put EEGs on, did nerve conduction testing, and found out that the stimulation of the foot took 1.5 seconds for it to come to the brain, resolve, go back to the homunculus and cerebellum for motor control. So when we did this, I asked all the doctors and scientists I was with, how do we move when we step on glass? And they said, well, silly, you don't understand. It's a ganglion reflex.
Yep.
Hit your knee. And I said, that can't be, because if I step on glass, I just go boing, which I don't. I move intelligently, safety. So I jumped to a hypothesis that muscles in the brain didn't move the body, because they weren't moving fast enough.
The body moves itself and the brain takes credit for it.
Right. And so
exactly right.
So then what was left, we just made an assumption that the fascia was moving the body, and that the brain was coordinating the action to the musculoskeletal system. Think about it this way. So when we move a prosthetic limb, well, it's not the brain muscle connection, because it's not attached to the nervous system. So then when I ask, well, it's thought that's doing it. Well, it can't be thought. We know that. So there has to be intention. So that means that intention is coming somewhere to move. And what we believe is that the musculoskeletal system is moving at the speed of light, speed of sound, to meet the fascial movement. So we believe that your intention, or your field, moves the body. That's the intelligent, innate intelligence. And the musculoskeletal system connects the movement. Think of the fascia being a positive movement force, and the negative force, the grounding of the body, is the musculoskeletal system.
Interesting.
And if there's heavy metals, restrictions, or dehydration, that movement's no longer smooth, and that's where you get malfunctioning movement.
There's a nerve fetishism in science, because it's easy to measure. Just like we also have a cholesterol fetishism, where it was easy to look at cholesterol in blood in 1930, so we still focus on that. It's like the old story of the drunk guy trying to find his car keys, and he's looking underneath the street light, and someone comes up, where'd you drop them? He goes, well, I think over there. I think, well, why are you looking under the street light? Well, because I can see here. Right. So the idea that only nerves control things is dumb.
Yes.
And it's probably more advanced than the idea that only chemicals can control things, which is what Big Pharma generally believes. Yeah. The body is simultaneously chemical and electrical via nerves, and we communicate via other signaling mechanisms. And these are signaling mechanisms that simultaneously do it. It makes it very hard to hack a system like that. our cells are magnetic, and we can prove it. They make biophotons. They're light-based, and we can prove it. And the one that's missing that explains the signaling mechanism for what you just described is that our bodies are quantum.
Yes.
Now, everybody uses quantum, like I think someone's selling quantum pudding at this point. And like quantum actually has a very specific meaning. And everyone theorizes microtubules are quantum, or there's a quantum effect. But what we do know, and most people just miss the importance of the study, for the first time about 5 years ago, scientists figured out they can measure proton spin in living systems.
Right.
So they looked at the brain, and they found that every time the heart beats, the proton spin of everything in the brain changes, and it changes simultaneously with no lag whatsoever. What that means is that every proton in the brain is quantum entangled with the heart, which allows for zero lag time, no latency whatsoever changes. And that means that what's happening in the foot and the brain, there is a reasonable signaling mechanism to figure out why that's happening.
Mhm.
So do we know electricity, magnetic, vibration, sound, chemical, light, magnetic, or quantum? It'd be nice to figure that out. I don't really care as long as it works.
I think we're gonna have so this is the perfect time, because you're actually describing the science of what we're doing, delivering.
Some theories anyway. We'll figure it out eventually.
Yeah, I mean, it's gonna be interesting.
Yeah,
because
what I care about is results.
results.
That's
And
how it feels.
that's how it feels.
Yeah.
Mhm. So I'm curious what your thoughts are on what Brian Johnson's doing.
You know, Brian's been on my main stage twice.
Yeah.
And I've been in the field of longevity for 20 something years now. And there's kind of two camps in longevity. There's the let's extend human lifespan as long as we can, as long as we want. And we'll call it a pro-living stance. And there's whole conferences based on that. And then there's another, like, let's not die, right? I am not in that camp.
I'm completely with you.
And like, I really appreciate Brian. Clearly, in fact, I asked him this on camera. Like, are you on the spectrum? It's okay. Like, I was too. And he didn't answer. He just sat there for 30 seconds, which was enough of an answer.
Mhm.
And like, full respect, we need more media attention on longevity. And when I wrote my big longevity book in 2016, I thought about calling it like How to Not Die was the subtitle. My publisher was like, people, you can't say that. Like, that'll scare people. I'm like, all right, fine. We won't do that. So I love that he's getting a lot of attention out there. What I do believe, though, is that running away from death generates unhappiness. And the only thing you can do
Completely agree.
is you can say, I've got gratitude, I've got forgiveness, I've got consciousness, and I'm going to live as long as I choose. And you have zero reactionary energy towards death. In fact, you realize death is an illusion. So come into biohacking, you will become a longevity advocate, you'll become a consciousness advocate, and you will lose your fear of death. It's a different vibe, but I love what he's doing because we need more people saying we can live longer.
So what do you think about, because words are powerful and they vibrate, and your body vibrates when you speak. So if I say my goal is not to die, I'm vibrating my cells in death.
Here's how I explain this. When people come into 40 years of Zen, they're entering a really advanced state of consciousness with a computer guiding them. And it's one where we teach people to write intentions that work. The cells in your body, that meat operating system, it's not a binary computer, but it is kind of like a computer, and it has its own language. They call it spelling because you're casting spells when you make words. Your subconscious, and in particular your cells, do not understand the negative tense, which is why when Google first got started, their motto was "Don't be evil." What the unconscious hears is "Be evil."
Yes.
And if you focus on "Don't die," then your subconscious hears "die." It's like this. If you tell your kids, "Don't forget your shoes,"
They forget it.
they'll forget their shoes. And if you say, "Remember your shoes," they'll remember their shoes. So I always phrase my intentions in a positive,
Yes.
just because I know my operating system is too dumb to understand the negative.
Yeah. Which makes me, because listening to his message and what he's advocating for, I'm all for it. the words
Yeah.
to be healthier, you know.
Being healthy is
But
great.
to say don't die, put it on t-shirts, put it on things, and have people advocating for that, I think is a dangerous spelling game. And that's why I asked, because I was curious what you thought of it. Now, what about the structure that is built into a day? So I believe we're supposed to operate off of how we feel. So if I wake up one day and my body's asking me to rest, the brain is saying, well, you have a structured program. You need to do X, Y, and Z in order to be consistent, in order to maintain your goals and your metrics. But what if my body was going to be optimized in resting that day? So my question is, what is your thoughts on having the exact same routine every single day for 50 years and forcing the body to listen to what the program is? Because consistency is key. I believe in that. But there are days where your body is telling you something.
It's important that we don't operate solely off how we feel. Because if that was the case,
We'd get nothing done.
not just that, there are times when, I don't know, bad things were happening with venture capitalists where like there might have been bodies if I listen to how I feel, because, you know, we can get pissed off sometimes. So rational, healthy adults don't just listen to how they feel, because society would collapse. So
Yes.
that's one of the things that we put in. And there's actually a lot of automated suppression of emotions that happens that most people aren't aware of until they do the work on it, until you just resolve that stuff. And then you're saying, okay, what is my felt state and what is the ideal input for my body today? And this gets really interesting. This is my last book, Smarter, Not Harder. It's that the ego, or the meat operating system, it is wired to make you want to not burn energy and to bring more energy in. And this is why you wake up in the morning and there's the couch with a croissant. By the way, croissant is the American spelling. And since there's more Americans who eat them than French people, if you believe in democracy, we need to change how we say croissant. Just kidding, French people. I love you too. I'm half Canadian. All right. So getting off of the croissant, what's happening is the body says, oh my gosh, Netflix and bread or the gym. And we get really frustrated because why don't I want to go to the gym? Because your body is wired for 2 billion years to not waste energy and make sure you have enough energy. So the desire and the feeling is always going to be chill and eat.
Comfort.
And the behavior that might make you live longer or feel better would be discomfort, right? So this thing creates a lot of fear and shame and guilt in people. And your body is wired to be lazy, to keep you alive for multiple generations in case you run out of food. That's just a fact. So should you have the same habit every single day? Yes. The habit should be, step 1, what is my current state? Step 2, what is my goal? Step 3, what is my activity? And this is the basis for what we do at Upgrade Labs with AI and surveys and goals and finding the thing to do. So here's my habit every single day. I wake up whenever I wake up. And then there's only a couple things that really matter. And one is synchronizing the clock in the body. So go outside without glasses as soon as you can and get some sunshine in your eyes, because this synchronizes your body clocks. You'll go to sleep better. Other than that, I have an hour or two set aside every morning to do whatever my body needs. And if my morning readiness score is low, and you can measure it on rings and all sorts of ways, or just with intuition, you can do something that's going to be restorative. Or like, wow, I slept really well. I feel really good. Like, let me go pick up some heavy stuff. The deal is daily practice, something that improves me every single day. It could be breath work, could be meditation, could be red light, could be cryo. But if you fall for the trap of doing the same thing every day, which is very easy because it requires no willpower, you will grind yourself into a stump. The president of Upgrade Labs, Griff, is a triathlete. And he's been training his entire life, like every single day. And so I just said, hey man, I got a challenge for you. You know, you're COO of Equinox and Orange Theory and Soul Cycle. Now that you're with Upgrade Labs, let's Let's see what happens. I want you to look at your morning readiness or your body battery. He uses a Garmin for that. And just for a month, your goal is, instead of to run X number of miles a day, your goal is to keep your number at this or higher. And he's right in the middle of the experiment. It's like, look at what's going on. Your whole brain changes. Otherwise, I have so many people I've met, they're, 50, 55, and they've got, sizable muscles and a big pot belly. It's like, I work out, been lifting 5 days a week for 20 years. And I've never worked out this hard to be this fat. And all of my joints are shredded, like they're not in a good way shredded. Like my joints hurt, my shoulders hurt, I need more surgeries. And I keep working out and I keep getting fatter and I don't know why. I'm like, yeah, when I was 26, actually I was 23, I went to the gym for 702 hours in 18 months, 90 minutes a day, 6 days a week. And to do that and still have a 46-inch waist and to not lose weight, like, I believed it would work. It just didn't. And I'm just stubborn. So it took me 18 months to just say, maybe that's not how to do it. That was something, daily practice. I'm going to go to the gym. I'm going to do it every day, no matter what. It doesn't matter if it's at night, in the morning, middle of the day. This is my top priority. I will not miss. And the amount of willpower it takes to do that, too bad there was no results. So that's why, how are you doing today? Do what your body needs. That's the habit.
And have you found, by testing your readiness and tuning into your intuition, that you've become more in tune with your intuition because of technology that's able to tell you? Like when you measure yourself and you're like, yeah, I actually do feel like that. So when I feel like this is what the measurement's going to show me. Now you can reverse engineer it. You're more in tune. Is that something that's happened for you?
If you want to become more conscious quickly, use technology to learn the felt state of the body. So I learned, back in 2005, one of the researchers for the Heart Math Institute came to the nonprofit longevity group that I was running. And I learned, you can measure the body's parasympathetic versus sympathetic state. So I became a trainer, then an advisor to the company. And the first way I ever figured out, this is the state of my nervous system, was by looking at a little app that tells me what my nervous system is doing. And after 6 weeks of that, now I can feel that hundreds of times a day without my knowledge, my body is shifting from like focused awareness into fight or flight, completely without my knowledge. And then, now I have a tool. Let me bring it back. So it was like playing whack-a-mole with my nervous system hundreds of times a day until I learned to chill the F out, right? This was not my decision. It was nothing to do with morality. It was just automated systems that got set that way by probably the way I was born or early childhood experiences. I mean, there's a whole variety of reasons for that. And then I started practicing neuro-feedback 25 years ago because my brain was failing. Like I bought disability insurance. I would have fired myself, and I'm in Silicon Valley and my career's taken off. I can't remember anything. So I went to this clinic. I was the only one in Silicon Valley. A chiropractor was doing it and hooked electrodes up to my head. And I could feel things I didn't know about were shifting. But what convinced me to stay on that path was I walked into the waiting room and this little kid, I don't know, 8 or 10 years old, just walks up to me and goes, ah! It just runs in a circle around me, not once or twice, like 40 or 50 times. And my untrained nervous system is like, what is going on? And I saw the same kid 6 weeks later. And he walks up to me and goes, hi, my name is Bobby, or whatever his name was. And I'm like, what just happened? And his mom said, well, he's autistic. And this kind of training has helped him regulate his brain. So I'm like, all right, I felt something. And I saw it work on other people that was really dramatic. So I bought a machine. And I've been training myself to enter the most advanced states of meditation and to have levels of control of the brain that are really profound for 25 years. And for the last 10 years, 40 years of Zen has had celebrities, pro athletes, and a lot of entrepreneurs, CEOs come through and spend 5 days putting their brain in the same state as 40 years of daily meditation practice. Mm-hmm. It's like, should you meditate for an hour a day? To your question earlier, as a daily habit, I would have said yes when I was 35. Now I'd say
it's instant.
It's a cheap way to do it, but it takes a lot of time. Mm-hmm. I'm replacing 20 to 40 years of meditation in 5 really hard days. And when you're done, your brain does the thing that advanced Zen monks do. And our studies show that 90% of people are keeping it a year later, that they're maintaining the state. So should technology show you how your control systems work. It's like inside your brain, there's all these levers and dials and knobs and gauges, like the cockpit of a giant jet. If you ever stick your head in there when you're flying, like, what does all this stuff do? You have no idea. You don't even know it's there. And you could go, like I have, to the monasteries and remote parts of Asia, and you can sit, in lotus pose, and there's the lama or the teacher, and you're doing this, and you're chanting, or you're visualizing the Buddha or whatever. And then when I hit that new little state, like there's a nuance in my state, if the teacher had their awareness on me versus someone else in the class, and my eyes were open enough that they could go, there's my feedback signal. Like once a day, good job. Or maybe if I'm lucky afterwards, I sit there and do that again, and then they'll do something with their energy and mind, and they'll show me a thing. Or 1,000 times a second, I can have a computer saying, warmer, colder, until I find the freaking switch. And then it's mine, and then I have it. And that is a way to really rapidly evolve human consciousness. And it's tied directly to longevity. So like the things I really care about is I am all about people living as long as they choose and being vibrantly healthy beyond what we can even imagine until you're done. And that's the goal.
So do you feel that, taking it a step further, if I take a supplement and it makes me feel a certain way, and I memorize the way that it makes me feel, that after doing it enough times, I know how to get there myself, so I no longer need that supplement? Do you feel that, have you had that experience that you can tune into the frequency of a technology or a supplement so that you no longer need it?
You can replay any emotion or feeling your body's ever experienced, like a Spotify playlist, right? There's a recording of everything. And it's a pretty advanced skill. Because, what did it feel like the first time I held a puppy? And it's not a thought. And this is a big part of the first couple of days of 40 Years of Zen is, how do you replay a negative emotion in a place of safety or a positive experience you've had? How do you make that? So you play this inside the body, go, oh, that's great. So you can shift your state way more than you think you can. You can go, oh, I'm triggered right now. And you can, once you have the skills, you can just go in and suddenly you're not, you've changed it. I have not found anyone who can, without either technology or supplements, put themselves in a full state of MDMA or LSD or ketamine, right? It doesn't mean that I can't leave my body in a meditation the way I might, similar to ketamine. But there are direct effects. Your body's cells, specifically mitochondria, they're antenna on reality, right? You can change your antenna and it'll change your experience. And to my experience and knowledge, I don't think our consciousness changes our antenna's structure or power levels, but you can change where they're directed. So there's a lot of state change you can do. And there are some things where no amount of intention and wisdom is going to add more electrons to your mitochondria the way, say, ketones will. So it's a yes and. The goal of all of the longevity and consciousness work that I do is have a system that has more power than it did before, and have a system that beautifully allocates power. So instead of fear, it goes to peace. Instead of hunger, it goes to nourishment. Instead of loneliness or porn, it goes to sacred intimacy. Instead of, again, loneliness, it goes to community. And there's so much energy and power left over that it goes to further evolving yourself.
So going back to the conversation earlier about structuring your day, if we look at the people who live the longest, they have consistent community, they have consistent purpose, they have consistent movement. It's usually walking in nature. And the diet and everything else is kind of inconsistent because of where they are.
Yeah, Blue Zones is kind of BS. Sorry.
Yeah, that whole show.
I love Dan Buettner. Dan is a beautiful human being. He's just wrong about this.
So it's really funny to me that even in the areas in which they're pulling those zones, that's not what they eat.
Yeah.
But I do believe that having community, I do believe in moving my body in nature. I do believe in having purpose as core fundamental pieces to living longer. What do you think about that? Because you've already brought it up that you think it's bullshit. The Blue Zone movie and what they're saying. So what aspects are you saying that you disagree with?
In Blue Zones? There's a couple things. One is there's some cherry picking of data. Hong Kong is also a blue zone that eats more red meat than anywhere else on the planet. So if that exists, it cannot be the beans. Right? You just need 1 point to disprove a hypothesis, and it is fundamentally disproven there. So mostly it's the nutritional stuff. In terms of being outdoors and getting sunlight and circadian biology are at the very core of biohacking.
Yeah.
In fact, I'm wearing True Dark glasses. I started this company 11 years ago. These are blocking the toxic part of the blue spectrum under 490 nanometers and allowing the beneficial part that wakes you up.
Yeah.
Most of us don't have any idea that this is going on. And at night, there's ones that stop jet lag and make me go to sleep and get good sleep scores on my tech. So changing the color of your light is one of those things that would be just terribly effective, but no one knows about. So that light exposure that you're getting in these so-called blue zones, okay, they're going for a walk outside. There's plenty of studies to support that. And they're not wearing sunglasses either. I don't wear sunglasses outside unless I'm on a glacier. Then what about community? Community and family are really, really important. And in the US in particular, we actually choose our own family. And this is different than the way it's happened historically. You've probably heard blood is thicker than water, right? Do you know the real quote? The blood of the covenant is thicker than the water of the womb.
Oh,
the quote really means your chosen family is more important and impactful than your birth family. Because you can have a sister who's a fucking sociopath, and the fact that she's your sister doesn't matter because you don't want that in your life. And it's okay to choose your family.
You know, Dave, there's not too many times in my life where I hear stuff and I go, aha, I learned something profound today. That was profound.
Isn't that amazing?
Yes, because we live with that. Like we live in a community. We live together. We work together. We share a bank account, which is way off the deep end for most people.
Yeah.
And we feel more connected to each other than we do any of the family for the most part.
There's nothing wrong with that. And the fact that we can choose our families is important. And respecting your elders, respecting your parents. You can respect your parents, you can love your parents, but if your parents are abusive, you don't have to have them in your life anymore.
Well, there's a lesson that, I mean, I feel when we come into this world, we've chosen the parents to give us the lessons we needed until we no longer need that lesson. And if we don't want to take it from them, we'll meet new people who will give it to us. So every person that I meet is teaching me something. And if I'm like, I don't want the lesson, I'm going to run away from this one. Well, somehow they end up in someone else, the same lesson that my parents were trying to teach me, but I'm more comfortable learning it from them because
like
it's not my mom and dad.
That's called all the people you date until you deal with your trauma.
Yeah. I mean, I've seen that in my life. It's everybody that we meet is teaching us something, reflecting back something.
I've got a litany of female relationships to prove that to be true.
Yeah. They always say, you're going to marry someone just like your mother or father.
I did.
Most people do.
I had multiple caregivers. So it was the caregivers, not because my brother and my sister were my mother and father, and I had my mother and father. So I went on a journey to learn about them all.
It makes so much sense, and we do all this because our unconscious systems are trying to become in balance. It's been really interesting dating a top relationship expert and doing relationship masterminds with highly successful people in relationship who are working on how to have epic relationships. And I look at the skills of biohacking the body. It's just as important to biohack your relationships, where you understand, there's things that you're not going to be aware of that are happening in you or in your partner, and that there are specific techniques or technologies to regulate those so that you don't break the relationship, or so that you can recognize if it's not the right relationship and you can move on in a peaceful, high integrity way. And if we would just teach kids nervous system regulation and basic relationship skills, the world would be a very different place. The problem is most of us learn relationship skills from our parents, who learned it from their parents, who learned it from their parents who were traumatized by World War II or from whatever the hell happened. And so this is missing, just like all those knobs and dials and switches for how to have my energy back, how to be conscious, how to choose my state. there are a bunch of those for how to interact with a partner or partners, if that's your thing. It doesn't really matter. You just need to be able to say, how do I stay regulated? How do I understand that most of what other people do is about them, not about me, and not take it personally? And if you can do that, and you can learn how to communicate about things, it's a lot easier.
Well, we talk about the Groundhog Day.
Yep.
And Groundhog Day means I have a lesson, and maybe it's a meaningful, impactful event. A year later, I have that same lesson. But the time from the first lesson to the second one, did I grow or did I not grow? If I grew, the lesson's easier. If I didn't grow, it's louder. And so when we meet people, for example, if I'm dating somebody, they're going to show me a lesson. If I run away from that lesson, I don't learn anything. I'm going to date that same lesson again, and it's going to be much louder and more painful. And these patterns in Groundhog Day that we pay attention to show up in everything that we do, in people that we meet. And one of the things that we've found patterns in is astrology. And this is a very woo thing in the Western world, but what is astrology to me? If I meet a firefighter, I can give you the characteristics of most firefighters. They like to play basketball, they love dogs, they're heroes, they're family men. They like to wake up early and work out. If you pick a lawyer is very structured. They like to protect and defend people. They're all about justice. And so there's patterns around jobs, but there's also patterns around people, around the times in which they're born. What is your experience and thoughts around astrology?
Being a 7-degree Scorpio.
And there's also even quotes that millionaires don't use astrology, but billionaires do. And Hippocrates even said, a doctor is a fool if they don't practice astrology.
Not a doctor. Yeah, a doctor is not a doctor, but a fool if he doesn't practice astrology.
Yeah.
I will admit, as a kind of Western raised, agnostic leaning atheist computer science guy, up until my 30s, I was, if you believe in that stuff, you're so stupid. And that's one of those dogmatic, like, spiritual beliefs around science, where it's science with a capital S, and that's your church, and things, they have to work this way. And anyone who says they don't work this way is a bad person, which is stupid. So I just like to follow the data, and I've seen intriguing results. I think it's confusing because there's 10 different astrologers who follow an Ayurvedic or a Vedic system versus 5 elements kind of thing from China, and they don't always agree. But there are intriguing patterns, and I've had great value from some astrology, and I've also seen no effect from others. So I'll say I don't necessarily know that I can say this is exactly what I would do. It makes great sense that it would have an effect on you if you understand that the reality we live in is pretty much quantum foam, and everything around us is made up by our bodies.
I, like you, data science guy. So I found my way to read astrology and map it to the body, and created the system that we have around that. But I find, like you said, astrology is just like medicine, is very religious. And if we pull the religion out and I just look at the numbers and I attribute a number to a value, that value and that number seem to be consistent. Like Scorpio, gallbladder. So had issues through here, down the outside the leg, right to the toe.
That would be me.
Consistently. And so with just using those inputs, we found them to be consistent. And we have been creating a new way to help people understand their own bodies based on the math of astrology.
I like that. And there's things like gene keys, which is really profound.
Gene keys is really cool.
Human design.
Yep.
And a bunch of other systems where you look at that and, like, I'm pretty sure this isn't just made up nonsense, because you can have a random generator of things and it wouldn't match. But it matches way more than it should, at least in my perception. But when you look at the data versus my perception, then you get some either truth or not truth in it.
So one of the things for gallbladder, you want to try something right now?
Sure.
Okay, take your right hand, put it underneath your right rib cage. That's up in your gallbladder. Just push in there. Take your left hand, put it up here. We'll breathe 3 times through the mouth and 3 times through the nose. So think of these as antennas.
All right.
And you're drawing signal from your field in.
Okay.
So breathe in through your mouth. 2, 3, through your nose. 2, 3. Say, I no longer need to hold this anger or resentment in my body.
I no longer need to hold this anger and resentment in my body.
I'm letting it go now.
I'm letting it go now.
And
How does that feel?
how's that feel?
I feel some twinges in my right SI.
Yeah.
And I'm not sure I'm holding a lot of anger in my body right now.
Well, no, it's not
Yeah.
that conscious.
Oh,
It's the tissue.
It's in the tissues, I agree.
Yeah. And so,
Mhm.
not that you have it, but even when you work with people around you, we absorb their emotions. As a practitioner, I almost killed myself working 14 hours a day. And I blew up like a whale holding all these emotions. And
It's because you didn't know how to ground them out and you didn't know how to drop them at the end of the
Correct.
day.
I didn't. And
Yeah.
I did it the way that other practitioners were, which is those are bad emotions, push them away, don't die.
Yeah.
And so one of the things that we found is that I treat the body as a fluid adaptive biological computing system, which means that there's code and programming.
Absolutely there
And
is.
affirmations is programming language.
Mhm.
And so specific with the organs and the resets, there's an organ reset, which is 10 motions, which when measured by acupuncturists that are really good is 70% of their treatment.
Wow.
And you do it by yourself within 7 to 10 minutes. And so we have acupuncturists and Chinese medicine doctors all over the world using this today with their patients. And that was the one for Scorpio.
I like it. And I'm not at all skeptical about it. I would say in terms of the shift in my state, I'm not feeling a big one. I'm feeling something on the right, but it just feels like the muscles here are tighter than the muscles over here now.
Fair
like
statement.
Pancreas.
Fair statement. Because the gallbladder meridian is the most dominant, goes down the side, and it controls lateral movement. So when I'm working with an Olympic athlete and they articulate, they have one side that's dominant to push off of. So if you actually correct the gallbladder movement, then they become more balanced and they have better performance. So these are just slight things that we did that we noticed had a measurable impact on performance. And now we're still trying to figure out why they work.
One of the things that I do as a biohacker is I'm looking at different organ systems in the body. And I just had a liver scan, like a clinical grade medical one. And they said I had the youngest liver they've ever seen, like a 10-year-old. No fibrosis whatsoever, almost no liver fat at all. Because I take care of my liver and my gallbladder because I know from acupuncturists and others that those are issues where I take ox bile with most meals to help me with bile flow.
Yeah.
And I know my body stores toxins better than others because of my genetics on the HLA-DR part of the genes. Because of that, I encourage extra bile flow and I make my body excrete the bile, bind it with binders so I can make new fresh bile. I'm optimized for basically marauding through villages in Europe, not getting sick and living through famines, which means my blood clots easily. So I can get hit by an arrow and not die, and I can do it again next week. I have a highly active immune system, so I don't get whatever's in the village that I'm going in to rob. That's my genetic lineage. And it doesn't work that well in the world we live in that's full of toxins, and because my body is recycling bile so I can live through famines. So I modulate all that biochemically, and it would make sense that I could do something energetically to support that as well.
So you said that you felt a little release on the right side. Now, so to put this in a fashion, which we're going to go through next, is that if you do that, that means there's less tension.
I feel less tension there.
Okay, so there's only 3 organs in the body that have contractile muscles: your heart, your stomach, and your bladder. The other 7 require microcirculation. What is microcirculation? It happens when you have less tension in the fascia around the organ.
That would make sense, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
Well, it's breathing too through the diaphragm.
Well, that's what it is. That's the breathing causes the microcirculation, but those 7 organs only work through the breathing mechanism. So if you have less tension, your rib cage expands more, you get more microcirculation in that area.
I can feel that, and like my lower abs feel like more open. They're like kind of pulsing and like moving stuff around right now. It's kind of interesting.
So last question before we move.
Okay.
What are your thoughts on what RFK is doing?
I had the honor of sitting down with RFK and having dinner for a couple hours. Dude, Bobby Kennedy is real. And I don't talk about this a lot. I practice energy medicine. You know, I've done 6 months of this neuro-feedback stuff, and I've learned from masters of voice. You can feel when someone's full of crap or when they're running an operation. And he's authentic, and it's not an act. He genuinely cares about what he's doing. He's not a politician. He's an attorney who's been fighting for 30 years to make the world a better place. And that is real, and it's consistent. And what the media tries to go after him for sometimes is they're saying, well, you were a heroin addict. He's like, yeah, in the 70s for a year, I did that. And I've been in recovery for, 30, 40 years. What recovery means is that he has gone through every single trauma in his system and talked about it and been vulnerable about it. So you cannot unseat him energetically. It is profound. We actually talked about that. He can just sit there and, all these weird, corrupt Congress people saying things. He didn't lose his mind. He didn't get triggered even one time because what he's doing is real. So with his view of systems biology, of systems of governance, he's the only politician I've ever heard talk about mitochondria in a political speech.
Right.
Because he knows what they are and what they do, and he knows the 8 things that are most likely to have caused all the health things. And his perspective on, let's just do what the science says. Right? Let's actually do the science and figure it out. I am just amazed, and I'm exceptionally hopeful that with him running HHS, I've done all I can online to support him on that, that we're going to see a rapid shift in the US where it becomes legal to ask questions and to put forth a hypothesis about something without being censored or even having your license taken away. And that shift alone will magically increase wellness in the US. It'll make our kids not go through all the crap I went through as a kid with autism. It'll also make the US economy much better. Because right now, all the longevity work that I am interested in, I go to Dubai or I go to Costa Rica because those governments allow me to do what I want with my body. And the fact that the paternalistic US government run by big pharma tries to tell me what I'm allowed to do with my own biology, they do not own me. I think that they have it backwards. I own them. And when they try to do that, it's like, oh, but it's for your own safety, Dave. I'm like, I'm responsible for that. Like, I choose danger. Because
I choose danger.
If I'm allowed to go skiing, which is provably dangerous, why is that okay, but I can't use a peptide that I want to?
Yeah.
And the reality is, it's only economic. And it's in their economic interests. And I don't care about their economic interests. So my take on this is that Bobby Kennedy is going to unleash a new era of medical freedom and biological autonomy. And ultimately, the framers of the US Constitution, it was about freedom. And if you don't have freedom over what you eat and the basic tools of controlling your biology or your mental state or your emotional state or even your spiritual state, you are not free. And there are plenty of human beings around who would rather die than not be free. And I'm one of them.
Mm-hmm. I want to go back to something you started off with, because uniquely we have 4 Canadians around this table.
That's funny.
I'm only half.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm American by birth.
I'm born in South Africa, but
yeah,
Canadian.
I have both passports.
I'm both too.
Yeah.
So we're all 4 dual citizens.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's unique. That doesn't happen very often.
It is unique. I wanted 2 passports forever. And I finally, the 13 years, built a regenerative farm on Vancouver Island in Canada, raised my own food.
We live across from Vancouver.
We have a
Cortez or what?
on Lions
Salzburg?
Bay.
Lions Bay.
Oh, cool.
We have that's where our first center was. Where we,
I didn't know that.
Yeah, that's where we shot all of our media.
Amazing.
That's where we started all this.
We'd love to have you come up there.
Cool.
Okay, I have one more because it just came up. So we're going into the Aquarian age, and a lot of people don't know what that means, but it's technology. It's humanitarianism. It's technology. Technology is going to make a rapid shift. Already, you have ChatGPT is diagnosing people better than doctors. You're going to have robots that you can talk to, and it can diagnose you and give you whatever you need almost immediately. What are your thoughts on the growth of technology in health And how do you envision the future of health with technology blending?
Well, I've been into this for a long time. At the first conference where they invented the term big data, I gave a talk about how we needed the ability to own our data and to be able to share it, but still own it. And it turns out now that's finally happening with some of the crypto algorithms. There's a crypto company called Nilium that allows private compute. So now you can give your data to someone else to do processing on it, but they can actually see the data. It's mathematically amazing. So ownership of your data is critically important. I was also CTO and co-founder of the first company to get heart rate from the wrist, the way your Apple Watch does now. Intel bought us for $100 million many years ago. And I wanted to do this so I could track my stress throughout the day with heart rate variability. And it's profound, the amount of data. I have 2 different rings on right now. I also played a heavy hand in Web 1.0, the first big data center company. I worked with Google when it was 2 guys and 2 computers, and Salesforce when it was 8 people, and NVIDIA when there were 60 people, and just doing their infrastructure, right? So I've seen all this, and we have this beautiful vision, like information wants to be free. We're finally going to allow people to communicate. And now with 25 years of experience, I watch how, I think I'll say bad people. I don't usually say that, but I think that's the right thing. A few bad people, about 5% of the world, are sociopaths and psychopaths. And 5% of people are also profoundly good. But they took what's a beautiful system and turned it into a surveillance system.
Yes.
And what hackers do, we take control of systems we're not supposed to take control of. We know how stuff works, and we build things that we want. So I was a computer hacker. My last job before I started the biohacking movement was I was VP of cloud security at Trend Micro, a multi-billion-dollar computer security company. So I just speak from a deep voice of experience. Every technology that we build can and will be subverted by people who want to remove human freedom unless you build it into the technology itself that it can't do that. So social media used to be a great way for my friends to share scientific information with me. There was a time when Facebook was amazing. I'd go in every day and all the people I followed would talk about cool stuff. And then one day, like cat pictures, I'm like, I haven't logged into Facebook in a while, right? And so I look at technology, any new technology, there needs to be an open source version of it. And you need to be able to control your own code. And for most of us, we're too busy to do that, but we get to pick who controls the code. And it's a bad idea to trade your privacy for free email. I still pay for my email. And anytime someone says, oh, here's a brain implant for you, it's like, oh, really? So do I get to own the code, or are you going to choose the settings? Because you know that person will put malware and ads in your brain implant after it's in there unless you have full control. And this requires a government that absolutely fundamentally believes in personal autonomy. Problem we have, most governments, in fact, all governments, run on a simple operating system. Get more power. Yeah. Because the more power you have, the less likely the government is to fail. They think, until the power becomes so heavy that people overthrow the government. Democracy in the US has lasted 250 years or so, which is about as long as democracy has ever lived. And it's not really democratic anymore. It's kind of oligopoly, and we've lost our republic thing, and it's just kind of a weird thing. And you look at the rise and fall of empires the way Ray Dalio talks about. This happens with technology as well. So right now, ChatGPT can outperform a doctor on a complex diagnosis. If you have a weird symptom, in fact, I did this. Hey, ChatGPT, I have a weird pain right here. What is it? I just took a picture and it said, oh, that's probably a viscerosomatic reflex, which is what it was. And it was something in my subpec. And it turns out if I release this, the shoulder pain I've had goes away. I had not found a practitioner who had pointed that out. And I've seen a lot of really good people. So I said, well, let's talk about spiritual stuff. I went through a series of questions with ChatGPT, which probably is even the strongest one of them now. And it suggested a lot of weird esoteric things. And I said, I've done all of these things. And I asked it, so what are the things I should probably experience given all the weird stuff that I've done? And the one thing it said, well, you might want to try a darkness retreat. It's been on my list for 15 years. I just haven't had time to go spend 10 days in a cave somewhere.
Yeah.
And because I study all the old stuff, I said, okay, which type of darkness meditation would be right for me? This is something that very few gurus on the planet could do because it's looking at all of the stuff it's digested. And I was interested in a particular Tibetan form, and it mentioned that. And it mentioned two others that I was unaware of, even though I have a whole library down there of spiritual stuff that I read. I'm like, holy crap. I just used an AI system as a spiritual concierge to help guide me to the practices that might get me where I want to go faster. That's profound, because the vast majority of history has been, I don't know what to do. If someone trustworthy would just tell me what to do to get results, I would do it. So I've spent the last 8 years at Upgrade Labs going, I have all this millions of dollars worth of technology that can change your consciousness, change your biology, change your cell membranes, and cause rapid recovery and stimulation, all these things. How the heck do I know what to do? And so my whole thing has been, can I just make it so I have science and data and AI that just tells people what to do to get the results that matter to them? And I think there's a great hope for AI, as long as no one goes in and changes what it tells you so they can make more money. Yeah. That's my big concern.
Yeah.
So, it's super cool to hear you talking about this. I mean, my background was in data and wireless encryption and
Oh, encryption too, cool.
Well, I mean, I was incarcerated for 27 months, 17 months in solitary confinement because I went over my codes in 2008, 2005.
Turn over your codes, what, for PGP or something?
Well, yes, it was 4096-bit key on BlackBerry, and I was selling it to the government.
Okay.
So
good for you, man. I didn't know that about you.
Yeah, so I had 17 months in solitary confinement, which is what led to this.
Well, that gets you a lot of time to meditate.
It did. Yeah.
That's where I learned chiropractic.
I have a T-shirt. I still have it. It's from about probably 1993, and it is a barcode on the front that is a machine-readable PGP encryption algorithm.
Yeah.
And on the back, it says, warning, this T-shirt is a munition. Wearing that T-shirt was a felony because allowing a non-US citizen to see machine-readable encryption was the same as exporting a bazooka.
Yeah.
And I wore it through airports all the time because I'm like, I don't follow those rules. You can't make me.
So we actually built the first legally binding signature using importing encryption, using the Canadian repository through partners, and changed the law in the state of Washington through a company called ID Certify to identify authority, identity and authority.
It's like 94, 95 when you did that?
Well, it was in the late 90s by the time we put it together and sold it. And Boeing, it was one of the companies that used it to sign documents. So that was where I was going in that direction. And so when you start talking about personal autonomy and data, stuff like that, that was really where I was driving. But that what led to my change. And what Jay was saying is that I was in the most pain that I'd ever been in because I've been trying to fix myself for 20 years. And I ended up 17 months in solitary confinement. Talking about spirituality, I wasn't a guy who prayed to God, but I did at that point. And I said, if you get me out of this, because I was in so much pain, I would have killed myself. I said, I'll spend the rest of my life helping people. And an hour later, my door opened and they put a neurologist who was a chiropractor in my cell for 14 months.
Wow, and he tell you everything. That's so cool.
And that's how I, when I got out, that's how I entered into medicine.
There's two traumas that are the hardest ones for humans. And I see this over and over at 40 Years of Zen, and it echoed in my world as well until I did the deep reset on this. And the reset process is something that's in my new book. It's at the core of 40 Years of Zen. It's a way of going in and turning off a trauma response in the body or in the mind. And the two traumas that are the hardest ones, and I think entrepreneurs and leaders face these the most, it's injustice and it's betrayal.
Yes.
And everyone I know who's built a big company has done the right thing and been punched in the face for it by sociopaths, narcissists, and things like that.
That's The
Mhm.
journey of
And-
entrepreneur, yeah.
Yeah, and the pain of being betrayed, where someone you trusted, it could be a family member, it could be, you know, someone in your business who steals money. I teach biohackers how to build big companies. I run the Business of Biohacking conference, and this is to help them. Well, here's how I did 100 million in revenue. Like there's things you should know. And I just take a poll. How many people have had someone you trust embezzled from you? 90% of the people
Of course.
have been betrayed, and we're all holding this weight, and it's a weight you carry all the time that creates friction and reactivity in your life until you do it. So the people who have betrayal as a core trauma don't trust anyone. You can't move things if you don't have trust. And then the people who have injustice as a trauma, they spend all their time being a victim and worrying about other people instead of themselves, right? So they become like, I'm gonna be a champion for whatever. And then they start bullying other people to make sure there isn't injustice. And bullying itself is a form of injustice. So they're replaying what they experience. So your job, if you really want to get there, is you've got to drop the pain of betrayal and injustice. And a lot of that pain is actually in your tissues as well as in your subconscious. And there are ways to do it. I had to go through all that as well. You certainly had to.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
So we're going to move to the next part, which is movement.
Okay.
How would you know that things worked out today? Like what were some of the things that you would want to accomplish at the end of today to know that fascial maneuvers or what we're doing is something you want to work with?
It's mostly just a felt sense, a felt sense of wellness and smoothness in my movement. I know that I've been working for 20 years on on my gait, like how do I stand, how do I sit, and it's been getting better and better over time. But I do notice shifts in that. For me, I rebuilt my right big toe because I did a yoga move years ago, just crow pose, kicking back to plank, stub the toe, and I have square joints in my big toe that are likely to fuse over time as you age. It's a genetic thing. So they started fusing because I didn't treat the injury right. And that was affecting my gait because I couldn't bend my toe. So I had it rebuilt. That means I have something in a core movement part of the foot that's flat anyway.
Okay.
I've had 3 surgeries on my right knee.
Okay.
In my early 20s because my kneecap just kept popping out. My leg would fold sideways. I'd fall over. So I know that travels up and goes through here.
Okay.
And so I know I have imbalances. And I've adapted to them as best I can. But I think when I walk, I could probably feel different.
Okay. Well, I can almost certainly say that at the end of today, that'll be the measurement stick that we will achieve. So
Sweet.
So let's do this. Super excited, Dave. It's been fantastic sitting here and getting to pick your brain about all of these topics.
Oh, likewise.
We don't have the opportunity, honestly, to talk to people that have your level of insight, both on the health, the technology, the community, and the consciousness side. I mean, people have skills in each one of those, but you have a very broad sense of all of these, which is super complementary to our belief systems.
Everyone listening to this, if you're going to live for a couple hundred years, and many, many people can, you're going to have to master those domains. So you might as well understand they matter and just start paying attention.
So let's have some fun.
Let's do it.
Cool.